The moving truck had barely pulled away from 1247 Magnolia Drive when Brenda Hutchinson spotted it from her kitchen window. She set down her coffee mug with a satisfied clink against the granite countertop and reached for her phone, speed dialing a number she knew by heart. "Margaret, darling, we have a new fish," Brenda purred into the phone, her voice dripping with the kind of false sweetness that could rot teeth. "Asian gentleman, expensive car, looks like money. You know what that means." On the other end of the line, Margaret Sterling, better known as Maggie to her fellow conspirators, let out a delighted cackle. "Oh, this is going to be fun. Let me call Diane. Time to dust off the welcome wagon." Marcus Chen stood in his new driveway, surveying the pristine neighborhood with genuine appreciation. After years of grinding through 18-hour days building his cybersecurity company from nothing, he'd finally made it. The sale of his startup to a Fortune 500 company had set him up for life, and Willowbrook Estates represented everything he'd worked toward: manicured lawns, tree-lined streets, and the kind of peaceful suburban dream his immigrant parents had sacrificed everything to give him a shot at achieving. He was still admiring the Spanish-style architecture of his new home when he heard the click-clack of heels on pavement. 3 women approached with the kind of synchronized precision that would have made a military drill sergeant proud. The CU leader, a blonde woman in her 50s wearing a pink blazer that screamed, "I demand to speak to your manager," extended a perfectly manicured hand. "Welcome to Willowbrook Estates," she announced with theatrical enthusiasm. "I'm Brenda Hutchinson, co-president and your new neighbor. These are my associates, Margaret Sterling, our treasurer, and Diane Fowler, our secretary." Marcus smiled genuinely, grateful for what seemed like a warm welcome. "Marcus Chen, pleasure to meet you all." "Oh, the pleasure is all ours," Brenda said, her smile never wavering. "We take great pride in maintaining our community standards here. Speaking of which, I couldn't help but notice a few issues that need immediate attention." Marcus's eyebrows furrowed. "Issues? I just moved in an hour ago." Diane stepped forward, pulling out an official-looking clipboard. "Well, for starters, your mailbox doesn't meet HOA specifications. The numbers need to be exactly 3 inches. Tall, gold-plated, and use the approved Trajan Pro font. That's a $200 fine right there." "And your landscaping," Margaret chimed in, gesturing toward the perfectly maintained front yard that had been professionally landscaped just 2 weeks prior. "Those roses are planted 6 inches too close to the property line. That's another $150 violation." Marcus looked at the women with growing confusion. "But I haven't even had a chance to review the HOA bylaws yet. Surely there's a grace period for new residents?" Brenda's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Oh, honey, ignorance of the rules isn't an excuse. Don't worry, though, we're here to help. For a small consultation fee of $500, we can provide you with a comprehensive home inspection to identify all potential violations before they become costly problems." The 3 women exchanged glances that Marcus couldn't quite decipher, but something in their expressions made his stomach tighten. Years of dealing with hostile takeover attempts and corporate sharks had honed his instincts, and right now, every alarm bell in his head was ringing. "I appreciate the offer," Marcus said carefully, "but I think I'll review the official HOA documentation first and handle any legitimate violations through proper channels." Brenda's smile flickered for just a moment, a crack in the facade that revealed something much less pleasant underneath. "Of course, dear, but you should know that violations compound daily. Every day you delay addressing these issues, the fines double. By the end of the week, you could be looking at thousands of dollars in penalties." As the 3 women click-clacked away, leaving Marcus standing in his driveway with a stack of violation notices, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just encountered something far more dangerous than typical HOA bureaucracy. In the tech world, he'd learned to recognize predators by their patterns, and these women had all the hallmarks of practiced scammers. What Brenda, Margaret, and Diane didn't know was that Marcus Chen hadn't built a multi-million-dollar cybersecurity company by backing down from bullies. They'd just made the mistake of targeting someone who specialized in exposing fraudsters and protecting the vulnerable. The war for Willowbrook Estates was about to begin, and the HOA trio had no idea they'd just picked a fight with the wrong neighbor. Marcus spent his first weekend in Willowbrook Estates doing what any responsible homeowner would do. He read every single page of the HOA bylaws, covenants, and regulations, all 847 pages of them. What he discovered made his blood boil. The mailbox specifications Brenda had cited, they didn't exist. The landscaping restrictions Margaret mentioned, complete fabrication. The daily compounding fines Diane threatened, nowhere to be found in the official documentation. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Marcus was barely halfway through his first cup of coffee when his doorbell rang at exactly 7 a.m. Through the peephole, he saw the HOA Trinity standing on his porch like 3 vultures circling roadkill. "Good morning, Marcus," Brenda chirped when he opened the door. "We're here for our follow-up inspection. I hope you've had time to address those violations we discussed." Marcus stepped onto his porch, closing the door behind him. "Actually, I spent the weekend reviewing the official HOA documents. Interesting reading. I couldn't find any of the regulations you mentioned." The 3 women exchanged a look that lasted precisely 2 seconds too long. Margaret was the first to recover, her voice taking on a patronizing tone that could have curdled milk. "Oh, sweetie, those are supplementary guidelines that were voted on at special board meetings. Not everything makes it into the main documentation right away." "I see," Marcus said evenly. "And when were these special meetings held? I'd love to." "Review the minutes." Diane clutched her clipboard tighter, her knuckles going white. "Those records are being digitized. Very tedious process, but don't worry about all that bureaucratic nonsense. Let's focus on getting you compliant." Brenda pulled out her phone and began taking photos of Marcus's front yard with the enthusiasm of a paparazzi photographer spotting a celebrity scandal. "Oh my, this is worse than I thought. Look at this, ladies. The grass height is clearly exceeding the 2 3/4-inch maximum." Marcus looked down at his perfectly manicured lawn, cut by the same professional service that maintained half the neighborhood. "That grass was cut 3 days ago by Premier Landscapes. They service most of the homes on this street. Different standards for different lots," Margaret said smoothly. "Yours has unique soil composition requirements. Very technical stuff. Lucky for you, Diane here has connections with an approved landscaping service that specializes in your particular grass type. For a very reasonable rate," Diane added quickly. "Only $300 per week." Marcus bit back his first response, which would have involved several words his mother had washed his mouth out with soap for using as a child. Instead, he smiled. "I appreciate the concern, but I'll stick with my current service." The temperature on his porch seemed to drop 10 degrees. Brenda's smile became razor sharp. "That's your choice, of course. But I should mention that non-compliance violations have escalated since our last visit. You're now looking at $1,200 in accumulated fines, plus a $500 administrative fee for requiring a follow-up inspection. And there's the matter of your window treatments," Margaret added, gesturing toward Marcus's living room windows. "Those blinds are clearly off-white, not pearl white as specified in Section 14C of the Aesthetic Guidelines." Marcus glanced at his windows, which featured the exact same blinds as the house next door and the house across the street and pretty much every other house in the neighborhood. "You mean the same blinds that Mrs. Patterson has? And the Johnsons? And the Kellys?" "Grandfathered in," Diane said quickly. "Pre-existing installations. New residents are held to updated standards." The audacity was breathtaking. Marcus had to admire their commitment to the con, even as he felt his temper rising. "And these updated standards, when were they implemented?" "Last month's emergency board meeting," Brenda said without missing a beat. "Very last minute. We barely achieved quorum." Marcus nodded slowly, filing away every lie, every fabrication, every impossible coincidence. "I see. And who attended this emergency meeting?" The women looked at each other again, their silent communication becoming more frantic. "The usual board members," Margaret finally said. "Very boring stuff, really. Just technical updates to ensure our community maintains its property values." "Speaking of property values," Brenda interjected, clearly eager to change the subject, "we've had some concerns raised by your neighbors about, well, let's call them cultural compatibility issues." Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. Cultural compatibility? Oh, nothing serious, Diane said quickly, her voice taking on the false sympathy of someone delivering bad news they secretly enjoyed. It's just that some residents have expressed concerns about diverse cooking aromas. Very pungent. Some people have sensitive constitutions, you understand. The Hendersons mentioned they had to close their windows during your first weekend here, Margaret added. Something about exotic spy. Marcus Chen had always believed that information was power, and over the next 2 weeks he systematically dismantled the HOA trio's carefully constructed facade with the precision of a surgeon and the patience of a spider. The private investigator, Jenny Rodriguez, was worth every penny of her substantial fee. Within 48 hours, she'd provided Marcus with a comprehensive dossier that made his stomach turn. The pattern was sickeningly clear. Brenda, Margaret, and Diane had been running variations of the same scam for over 3 years. Look at this, Jenny said, spreading photographs across Marcus's dining room table during their clandestine meeting. The Patels moved in 2 years ago, hit with $8,000 in fabricated violations before they gave up and sold at a loss. The Washingtons' African-American family lasted 6 months before the harassment drove them out. The Garcias never even made it past their first month. Marcus studied the photos, families packing moving trucks, looking defeated and broken. His jaw clenched as Jenny continued her briefing. But here's where it gets interesting, she said, pulling out bank statements and financial records. Every time a family was driven out, one of 3 buyers swooped in to purchase the properties at below-market prices. Want to guess who those buyers are? Marcus didn't need to guess. The shell companies all traced back to the same 3 women who'd been terrorizing his neighborhood. They've made over $400,000 in profit from this scheme, Jenny continued. Buy low from desperate sellers, hold the properties for 6 months, then flip them at market rate. Classic predatory real estate fraud. While Jenny worked the human angle, Marcus deployed his own digital arsenal. Years of cybersecurity work had taught him that everyone left digital footprints, and the HOA trio were no exception. Their first mistake was using the HOA's official email server for their personal communications. Marcus's penetration testing, skills honed through years of legitimate security consulting, made accessing their poorly secured network almost trivially easy. What he found was a treasure trove of incriminating evidence. Email after email revealed the calculated nature of their targeting. They kept detailed profiles on every resident, noting ethnic backgrounds, estimated income levels, and perceived vulnerability to harassment. Marcus's file made his blood boil. High-value target, tech money, likely compliant due to cultural deference to authority figures. The women had grossly miscalculated. Their communications revealed the full scope of the operation. Margaret handled the financial manipulation, creating fake invoices and bogus fine structures. Diane managed the documentation, producing official-looking violation notices with made-up regulation numbers. Brenda orchestrated the psychological pressure, determining which residents to target and how aggressively to pursue them. Marcus's favorite discovery was an email thread titled The Chen Problem, sent just 3 days after their second encounter. From B. Hutchinson, willowbrookhoa.org. To M. Sterling, willowbrookhoa.org. D. Fowler, willowbrookhoa.org. Subject: The Chen Problem ladies, our new friend is proving more resistant than expected. Time to escalate to Phase 3. Diane, prepare the structural violation notice for his foundation. Use the same fabricated engineer's report we used on the Washingtons. Margaret, increase the daily fine accumulation to $200. We need to break him before he gets too comfortable. Remember, if he lawyers up, we play the community safety card. No one wants to be seen defending someone who threatens neighborhood children with unsafe construction practices. This one has money, so let's make sure we extract maximum value before he breaks. XOXO. Brenda. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. These women weren't just running a scam, they were systematically destroying lives for profit, and they enjoyed every minute of it. Marcus's investigation revealed that their reach extended beyond simple financial fraud. They'd filed false police reports against residents who fought back, claiming harassment and stalking. They'd sabotaged property maintenance to create legitimate violations they could then exploit. They'd even manipulated utility services, using their connections to create emergency situations that required expensive immediate remediation. The deeper Marcus dug, the more victims he found. Phone calls to former residents revealed a pattern of targeted harassment that went far beyond financial extortion. The Patel family's teenage daughter had been subjected to daily dress code violations that were clearly discriminatory. The Washingtons had faced constant noise complaints for having family barbecues that their white neighbors hosted without incident. The Garcias had been reported to immigration services based on completely fabricated claims. But Marcus's most significant discovery came from an unexpected source. While reviewing county records, he noticed discrepancies in the HOA's financial filings. The annual budgets submitted to the state showed significant gaps between reported income and actual expenditures. A deeper dive into the HOA's banking records, obtained through perfectly legal public information requests and some creative interpretation of corporate transparency laws, revealed systematic embezzlement. The trio had been skimming from legitimate HOA fees while simultaneously running their harassment scheme. They were stealing from every resident, not just their targeted victims. Marcus compiled everything into a comprehensive digital dossier: financial records, email communications, property transaction histories, victim testimonies, and detailed documentation of every fabricated violation and fraudulent claim. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable, but he needed one more piece to complete the puzzle: proof of their current operations in real time. That's when Marcus implemented what he called Operation Honeypot. Using his tech expertise, he created a sophisticated surveillance network around his own property. Hidden cameras captured every interaction, every fabricated violation notice, every attempt at intimidation. Digital recording devices documented their conversations. GPS tracking on their vehicles revealed their coordination meetings at Margaret's house. The trio, meanwhile, had escalated their campaign against Marcus to unprecedented levels. Daily violation notices flooded his mailbox. His doormat was non-regulation brown instead of approved beige. His car was parked 3.7 inches too far from the curb. His sprinkler system activated outside approved watering windows. And his outdoor light fixtures were creating excessive illumination that disturbed nocturnal wildlife habitats. The accumulated fake fines now totaled $47,000. Their latest gambit was particularly audacious, a claim that Marcus's home foundation was structurally unsound and posed a danger to neighboring properties. The engineering report they provided, as evidence, was a masterpiece of fraudulent documentation, complete with forged professional seals and fabricated structural assessments. "Mr. Chen," Diane said during their most recent confrontation, her voice dripping with false concern, "this is really for everyone's safety. The foundation issues could cause a catastrophic collapse that might damage the entire block. The emergency. Remediation costs are estimated at $85,000, but if you act quickly, we can get you approved for a special assessment loan through our preferred contractor." Marcus had simply nodded and promised to consider their generous offer, all while knowing that every word was being recorded and that the structural engineer they'd cited had been dead for 3 years. The Willowbrook Estates Community Center hadn't seen a crowd like this in its 15-year history. Word had spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. The mysterious new resident who'd been targeted by the HOA board was finally making his stand, and he'd requested an emergency community meeting to address matters of urgent community concern. Marcus had spent the morning setting up his presentation with military precision. Multiple backup systems, redundant power supplies, and enough documentation to sink a battleship. He'd learned long ago that when you're about to destroy someone's world, you better make sure your evidence is bulletproof. Brenda, Margaret, and Diane arrived fashionably late, their confidence radiating like toxic perfume. They'd clearly expected to walk into a room of maybe a dozen residents, and Marcus cowering in the corner, ready to capitulate to their demands. Instead, they found themselves facing 93 angry neighbors packed into every available seat, with more standing along the walls. The local media was there too. Jenny Rodriguez had made some calls, and reporters from 3 different outlets were setting up cameras. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus began, his voice carrying easily across the silent room. Thank you all for coming tonight. I know many of you have questions about recent HOA activities, and I promise you'll have answers before we leave here. Brenda immediately tried to seize control, her voice cutting across the room like a rusty blade. Now hold on just 1 minute. This meeting wasn't properly called according to HOA procedures. We need... Section 4.7 of the HOA bylaws, Marcus interrupted smoothly, states that any resident may call an emergency meeting when matters of fraud, embezzlement, or criminal activity within the board are suspected. I followed every procedural requirement to the letter. The crowd murmured, with interest. Fraud, embezzlement, criminal activity? This was already more exciting than most residents had bargained for. Marcus clicked to his first slide, a professional presentation that would have impressed any Fortune 500 boardroom. Over the past 3 weeks, I've conducted a comprehensive investigation.